it's great to be with everyone here today. I'd just like to introduce my colleagues that are on the call as well. I am joined by Sara Lynch from Queen's Estates, and also Andrew Grieve, who's the head of active travel at the Department for Infrastructure. We're here to talk today in a very conversational way about our project, which we have called Open Botanic, and we want to reflect on the lessons from engaging with industry in a cross-disciplinary manner across the university. So just to give you an idea of the team that was involved, and we'll talk a bit more about how it all came about in a moment. I've mentioned my colleagues here, but we did have quite a diverse group of participants that made up the team. So we had DFI, we had Queen's Estates, so we had a number of staff helping us in there, Sara and John. We also had stellar and invaluable help from Queen's Engagement team, and also then from staff in the natural and built environment. We had a research assistant from the natural and built environment as well, who was also employed with Sustrans, and that gave a really valuable input into the project as well. We had a number of different groups of students engaged with us, and I think that's one of the things that I'll certainly be reflecting on as an educational lecturer, just how students can be engaged in this type of work. We had students from planning in the natural and built environment and environmental management that were studying infrastructure and transportation planning, that were mainly involved in the on-the-ground data collection, and we'll talk more about that later on. We also had some MArch students, architecture students, who were studying in the studio known as Street Space, and some of you may have heard of that. It's a project that's ongoing on an annual basis with Dr. Agustina Martire, who focuses on different elements of street space use across Belfast. And some of those students were involved in producing high quality drawings for us as part of the research project. I'll just hand over to Sara now. She's going to talk a bit about the context for the project.
So I sit within the Estates Directorate as the head of sustainability, and we've always been kind of really conscious of the sustainable development goals, and since they've commenced, and I guess they've come into even more focus since the launch of Strategy 2030. So in taking this project forward, we were kind of looking at how we could do more transdisciplinary research or connect better with our colleagues within teaching and learning and research to kind of solve problems that we need to address to help deliver the SDGs within the university, and with particular focus on how we can reduce car usage around the university, and also how we can reduce our carbon emissions. So there's a number of SDGs then that this project kind of has really focused on: good health and well-being, quality education, our sustainable cities and our communities, climate action, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and partnering and actually improving that infrastructure, and also quality of education and providing real life living lab opportunities for our students to get involved in helping solve this problem. So a wee bit more about what the problem was then. Do you want to flick on there, Laura?
Yep.
So to give a bit of context to this, back when COVID started 2 years ago, prior to COVID, we as a university were looking at how are we going to tackle net zero? We've got so many issues around the university that need to be addressed, and one of these was around travel. And we were looking at what the potential was, starting to look at infrastructure around the university within and outside. And as COVID hit, many of you might be aware that Nicola Mallon launched pop-up cycle lanes in a number of areas across Belfast and across indeed the rest of the UK. They were introducing cycle lanes, using that opportunity with less traffic on the roads to kind of review how that infrastructure is set out across the city. And one was coming up the Dublin Road, and we looked at that and said, this is a real opportunity perhaps for us to get something connecting up to Botanic onto the university. How could we actually go about making that happen? And we had various conversations initially with Andrew and DFI, and then we spoke to our public engagement team, and we started to kind of build together a project on how we could actually create the vision of what that cycle lane could look like on Botanic. And we were really, really keen that we would involve our academic specialists within the university, but also that we would involve our students and provide this as a learning opportunity for our students. But the real aim from an estates perspective is and continues to be, how can we improve the infrastructure that would enable our staff and our students and our local community to cycle to the university on a more regular basis.
Andrew, do you want to tell us a bit more about DFI's thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think this has been quite an interesting experience from my point of view, because what the university was wanting to do, wanted to explore with their students, was actually very much in line with the objectives of the government department that I'm in, Department for Infrastructure. And Sara's already mentioned there was this opportunity of putting in a two-way cycle lane on Dublin Road, which is of course immediately to the north of Botanic Avenue. But that's not the only governmental relevance. I think if I go on to the next slide, yeah, there are a number of other things going on in government at the present time. The first one on the left-hand side is a diagram from a document called a Boulder Vision for Belfast. And that's a collaboration between the Belfast City Council, the Department for Communities, and the Department for Infrastructure. And it's really looking at ways in which Belfast, and focusing first and foremost on the city centre, how Belfast can become a more livable place. And an integral part of that is a thing called the Civic Spine. And if you look at the sort of vertical-ish line to the left, this links Queen's University with the Ulster University through the city centre and the city hall. And part of this vision is to make that civic spine running down Botanic Avenue, Dublin Road, around the city centre and out to Ulster University. How do we make that a more engaging place for the citizens of Belfast, for the stakeholders, rather than having it as a main artery for motor traffic? So that's one little thing that's going on in the background. And then on the right-hand side, we have published last year a Belfast cycling network. And just last week or the week before, time flies, we published the delivery plan for the Belfast cycling network, and that's on the right-hand side. Now, don't expect you to be able to figure out all the numbers and all the lines and all the colours, but the point about this is that we have identified as a main cycling route, a route from the riverside, the Strandmillis embankment, through Botanic Gardens, down Botanic Avenue, Dublin Road and into the city centre as a key cycling route. So that's what we're wanting to deliver from a governmental point of view. That's the livable city aspect of all this. And then Botanic Avenue is a key element of it. So the work that was done on Botanic Avenue with the students and the report that they produced is actually feeding in to the consultation, the stakeholder consultation work that we need to do in order to give reality to these plans. So that's a really very direct link between the project and what government is taking forward.
Sorry, Andrew, I got trigger happy there. My finger jumped on the slide. Apologies. Just to give the context then for what the project looked like, you know, from Andrew's point of view, there was this need for information, for data, and for engagement of stakeholders in the Botanic Avenue area. And we were able to, with the help of the Research Policy Office at Queen's, to get a small amount of funding for a research seed fund, an engaged research seed fund project. So we had the grand total of £5,000 to begin conducting some data collection. We had a research assistant, as I mentioned, who began engaging with local communities. We also had a survey that was published online targeting people who visit and live in and around the Botanic Avenue area, asking them what it is that you want to see in the area. Also, how do you travel to the area? That was one of the big questions as well. If you're familiar with Botanic Avenue, and apologies if you're not, it's a busy road full of restaurants, student living, but also local neighbourhoods, an important rail connection, and a very short distance to the university campus. So it really is a very important route for students in particular, but also a thriving and vibrant local community and business area as well. So we wanted to understand very much how do people move around the area? What would they like to see in the area? How would they like to use that space around the roads in that area? Because it's quite heavily car dominated at present. So we enlisted our students to first of all take some initial transport counts, traffic counts, vehicular counts, pedestrian and bicycle, and just general observations of the street. In terms of their studies, the students were then asked to produce a transport strategy that included Botanic Avenue and thinking primarily around more sustainable ways to travel, and active travel being a priority there. So that was their piece of work that sat alongside this. What then that led to was a more focused data collection that came afterwards, using some of our students from that module of teaching. So we weren't engaging with the whole class at that stage. We sort of focused in again on more detail that we needed. So the students gave a very valuable scoping evidence base for us to look at, what is going on in the area, what do we need to look at a little more closely, and then a few of our students then engaged in more detailed and slightly more rigorous data collection, which revealed all kinds of very interesting things. And also then we had some of these beautiful diagrams and images that our architecture students put together for us to envisage some phased plans and approaches and recommendations that we could put forward to DFI. So you can see here from the image that this is the final phase of the recommendations from the project, which is full pedestrianisation of part of Botanic Avenue. And you can see there a two-way cycle lane included on the left-hand side of the street, linking up to the library here at Queen's University. So just to highlight a few of the things that we did find out, in case you're interested about the data, what did the students come up with in their focus? Well, just to summarise really quickly, some of the things that they identified. First of all, that there are around 10 times the amount of pedestrians in the area every hour than there are cars. So 99 cars to 940 people. We also observed, a significant number of cyclists in the area, and also car parking spaces that aren't being used. So these were really starting to challenge our perceptions of what we think we need on the street, and how actually that road space could be used differently. So this is really starting to give us the indications that we really needed. And that was really valuable to our external partners in DFI. And Andrew, you'll maybe want to comment a bit on this next one as well. But the big thing here as well that we noticed was we asked people, how did they travel to Botanic? And what you can see on the left-hand side here is that visitors were saying that they mostly walk or cycle, 68%. But when you compare that to local businesses and organisations, their perception was that only 21% of people walk or cycle, and that they actually think that most of their visitors and most of their customers drive to the area. So this was a really key point of information that the students were able to bring from the survey work. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just going to make a point. I mean, the data on the previous sheet and these two charts here, to my mind, are like gold dust, because whenever we're trying to reconfigure streets for active travel, the opposition you get is, we need cars, we need car parking, we need to be able to let people drive. Everyone drives, nobody cycles, nobody walks, etc. And so, if you've got that kind of mindset, this sort of information is really astounding, because as you have pointed out, 900 and whatever it was people, they walk, 50 people cycle, 99 cars parked less than an hour. So, whenever you look at that, that completely demolishes this myth. And in a sense, it is an urban myth in this sense, that a street that has 20 cars in it looks full. A street that has 20 people in it looks empty. And yet it's the same number of people, because cars are big boxes that contain air, mainly contain air, you know, and so it gives you the idea that cars, there's more of car. Well, there is more of actual car, but there's actually no more people. So I mean, this actually helps the argument to reallocate road space to more profitable, more livable uses. So I mean, this is one of the things out of the. I'm not a very excitable person, but you know, this is one of the things out of the study that actually does get me excited. I think it's wonderful stuff.
Yeah, and it's been really encouraging to see this, because these were the things that we had a gut feeling about. But to see that in the numbers was a really interesting study for us. Now, this was very much a scoping activity. You know, it wasn't we were reacting at the time, if you like, to a lockdown. You know, we've heard about other sort of student experiences over lockdown, trying to engage students through the lockdown, trying to allow them to be out on the street. Was a very difficult element as well. So we were very much responding at the time. So we were thrilled that this kind of data was beginning to emerge. And just to say as well, there were a few other outcomes too. We've been able to present the project to the Minister for Infrastructure. We've been able to have follow-up engagement with local community groups. We've been able to speak to other stakeholders and transport providers such as TransLink and others that are engaged in sort of management of our streets. And there's ongoing sort of activity around Botanic Avenue. Obviously, with the release of the Belfast Cycle Strategy Action Plan, we can see that the priority is being given to develop Botanic Avenue for cycling in the short term, so in the next few years. So those have been some of the other outcomes that we've been really, you know, I think the stars have aligned in a sense, that we've been able to engage at this time. And that's really been sort of trying to capture that moment and engage our students with that at the time. In terms of, I'll just flick to this slide, but, you know, we just wanted to finish with sort of the last few minutes of our panel discussion, really just reflecting on the challenges of the project, the lessons from industry, from engaging with industry, and just how you know, we might see that going forward. You know, so I'll start with Sara first. And Sara, what were your thoughts just on how that has all gone from an estates perspective?
Yeah, this has been a brilliant project from us for an estates perspective, because it has allowed us to work with our academic colleagues on a really live project that has real meaning to our wider university strategy and to even the long-term aims of the university and where we need to be around net zero. It's given us the opportunity to work and get students involved in what we're doing on campus, and for them to be part of something that's real and not a case study of another city, and hopefully that then can actually influence their behaviours and their choices and on how they even understand sustainable travel and the implications of what's needed for the future as future planners. I think one of the challenges is trying to align these projects and what we want to do around them with what you're doing in your modules and your module content. And often when we need these projects, we can't really hold, if we'd held off on doing this for 2 years and only started it now, we would have missed the boat in many ways in trying to our various partners on board, and the energy even around that on the back of, you know, pop-up cycle lanes and all that was happening around COVID, and even having a minister in place who's really engaged on active travel. Trying to align it with module content isn't, and the timelines of the university and how module content is created was probably challenging, because I know that you were trying to do lots of stuff around that, Laura, to try and help us along the way, but there was only so much you can do to adapt your modules. And whilst it's nice to create, you know, specific student projects outside of their students' degree, and we do that, it's much better, I think, if it's actually integrated into what they're studying on a day-to-day basis, and will have more meaning and we'll get to a wider audience. Because often when we set these things up as separate projects, we get people who are already engaged in sustainability, whereas integrating it into the degree pathway in some way ensures that we're getting to that wider group.
Yeah, preaching to the choir as such in terms of sustainability. Andrew, what about you? What's been your sort of reflection on this, you know, and the challenges of it as well?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed working with the university on this, I have to say, because it gives a whole different dimension and a depth, actually, to the work that we're trying to do from a policy point of view. And what I mean by that is that the department, I know this has been recorded, but hopefully not too many people listen to it. Whenever it comes to research and getting views and understanding the way people think, as a department, we're pretty amateurish at that. Whereas there are skills of research and data collection and number crunching, which I think the university has, and even this whole thing about students, becoming involved in this collating data and understanding the importance of it all, that has been really useful from my point of view. But the other thing too is that I think in linking this with government policies, we're actually enabling students to actually have a stake in the future direction of things, in a real everyday or a real life situation, and in a sense, what I think would be particularly rewarding for me is in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, someone came to work for me in a policy area which said, oh yes, actually I was involved in that project. And I did a lot of the background on that, or I participated in it, so it's been a great experience from that point of view. And I do think that there are so many opportunities for academia and government or industry, but government to work together to actually inform the future and to inform policy making for the future.
Yeah, I suppose, just to kind of follow on from what you're saying, Andrew, about the students, and obviously a large focus of our of the conference today is about student learning and their experience. And I suppose there are challenges with this, and Sara's touched on them as well, where the timing of things can be so challenging. And that certainly was something that we found to be difficult in terms of, first of all, lockdown, and allowing the students to be out and to do the work that needed to be done in the time frame that matched with their semester calendar, and trying to make that feasible within the time frame they would need to obviously be assessed and to complete their studies. These were students due to graduate as well, so there was pressure for them at that time. So the alignment of things from that perspective was challenging, and I think as well that also has a knock-on effect for the sort of value to the students in terms of the project, because we're interacting with different sectors here that work to different timescales and different speeds of delivery, and these things are often in a slower pipeline than we see in university in terms of student work and how they get through their work. So being able to demonstrate to students that something will happen as a result of the work that you've done is a real challenge, because a lot of those students now have graduated, they're gone. We can share a bit about what has happened, but it may be some time before they see sort of the fruits from this project. So it's hard for us to make that connection, and that's something that I would really welcome any support or suggestions on, in terms of how do we bring that home to students, to really bring home the idea that this is an important project, that this is something to be involved in. And I think that's something that relates back to the Sustainable Development Goals as well, about quality learning, and how we are really bringing this back to students, that this is crucial, not only to the planet, but also to who you are as an individual living in society, as Andrew said, having a stake or having a say in how your environments are shaped for healthier neighbourhoods, for better overall public health and well-being. So that's something that I have certainly reflected on from the project. Another element that have struggled with is how sometimes our students get bolted on to a project rather than being at the core, and sometimes it felt a little like that, simply because we were under time pressure, and how perhaps we could maybe engage them more meaningfully and more centrally to the project. That said, you know, it was great that we were able to give students some remuneration for some of their time and their work as part of this project, which really did enhance the value of it in that way for those students. So there's lots of elements that we're thinking on and reflecting on from the project. You know, I suppose we were just kind of the final point we were going to mention was just our aspirations for the future. You know, and where we would love to see this going. You know, I don't know if Sarah, Andrew, you want to add any thoughts there?
I suppose ultimately we would just love to see that, you know, we'll start with the cycle lane, Andrew, and then ultimately we would like to see the full vision of what the students created. I think there is real value in looking at the pedestrianisation of Botanic and creating a much more livable street. But, you know, that's a higher aspiration. It's great to see it has been included now in the, you know, that Belfast cycle action plan as a short-term goal for 2022 to 25. So hopefully we'll have a minister on board that will be supportive of that. But we'll see what the election brings. But it's been a great learning process as well from us within estates and how we can work with our academic colleagues and work with the department on this to help solve a problem that really will have an impact on our university's wider kind of net zero aspirations. It's also been really good working with the engagement team. And they've been really critical to this because they've been able to help us make connections with other areas that we wouldn't have maybe thought of, you know, and trying to kind of help those connections with the ministers through DFI, but also through our own connections and getting those conversations set up and facilitating those conversations. And also the Seed Fund and the Sdg Engagement Fund was really critical in making this project happen. I don't know how many people know about that, but it was the conversations that we were having with research and enterprise, which brought that up, and this is exactly the sort of project that they wanted to see happening, and it was, you know, about getting the students involved in the research as well as academic colleagues. Yeah,
I think it is a good lesson for students though to learn that things do take time. You know, the first timetable that was put forward, you know, I sort of chuckled to myself. Not that I was against the time frame, but just realizing, you know, whenever you get old and grey-haired or white-haired like me, you know, you've learned that lesson that things do take time. There's so many stakeholders to bring together, so many people involved, so many views. But alongside that, the Open Botanic project, to my mind, also shows the importance of having a vision. So we've actually come up with a vision, you know, and too often in government, we do things in an incremental way without really thinking in terms of what is the vision. So the students have actually created here a vision for Botanic Avenue, and they've shown in drawings and research a way in which it could be better, it could be more livable. And to my mind, that can give impetus. You can sell a vision to people easier than you can sell statistics and, you know, and sell research. So, you know, to my mind, that is a good thing. So good to have the cautionary lesson that things do take time, but also important to get into your heart of vision for changing things and making them better for people.
Absolutely, and that it really has been a visionary and fun project to be part of. So many different voices at the table to really build on the experience across everyone that's been involved. In terms of my aspirations as an educator in the university, you know, we started this off with the hope that we could develop some kind of model that we could work and continue with in partnership, you know, with DFI to move on to another street and to do this again and to keep the vision going, and with the cycle strategy that's been developed, that this could be something of focus for a particular module, building on the progress from previous years, and trying to engage students fully with the experience. It's been highly rewarding, you know, and the students that have been involved have really enjoyed it, and it's really about bringing that personal element to learning, and how this really is crucial, especially within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that these are the kinds of projects that really match up what we're learning and who we are and what we're doing. And so it's been really exciting. And we're learning as we go. We've been saying this the whole way along, that this has been a learning experience for us as well. And, so we're just sharing that with you today. That's us really finished. Hopefully there's some questions or comments or suggestions. That would be great. I'm going to stop sharing shortly, and I'll also give you a link to the report if you want to have a closer look at it. So thanks very much.